James Melendez. Thank you for joining me today. This is my presentation on Kaizen, which is a continuous and incremental improvement methodology for all organizational types. Stay tuned. Now, I like to show this as a cornerstone for what Kaizen is. Now, it looks like a very minuscule savings, 30 seconds savings per day for those affected areas of a Kaizen event and the successful execution of a Kaizen. Now, the savings is 5.25 days per employee. So where the Kaizen is implemented, that savings can be affecting all those FTEs, all those employees in that respective area. Why I think that's really important is that it can also have an effect of cross-functional partners. It depends on the scope of that Kaizen event. I also like to pin to this simply that imagine a 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute savings, but I am also going to counterbalance this. All organizational types, whether it's for-profit, non-profit, governmental, education, and so forth, are complex organisms. They become more complex over time. There's a lot of reasons why organizations become complex. Competition, perhaps as regulation. And so there's other things that help an organization to become more complex. So the savings today can be decremented in terms of how that organization becomes more complex. So while an organization can become more complex, that savings can be realized, especially if the organization is aware of it and has a continuous improvement culture, a culture that allows for continuous savings. And that's going to chip away at those complexities. We can see how this yields two very important aspects of our organization's mission and vision and how we can support that. Ultimately, this is also about making sure that we are helping the entire stakeholder community internally and externally. Now, the term is from the Japanese, meaning Kai is change and Zen is for better, roughly translated to change for better in the English. And ultimately, this comes across in terms of being a continuous improvement statement. When I think of Kaizen, it's a relatively modern concept, and that really comes about, say, post-World War II. And I would look at W. Edwards Deming as being really pivotal in this. He really promotes the PDCA, which is Plan, Do, Check, Act. We'll talk about that in a moment. PDCA becomes one of the cornerstones in the Toyota production system, which is really evolving between 48 and 75. Deming is also the proponent of Total Quality Management, TQM, which is also part of Toyota production system. Toyota production system is a whole host of methodologies. When I think of TPS, people think about this being as an older model for only the manufacturing sector. What I like to say is that while you may not use TPS in terms of every aspect of it, you can really look at this in terms of having a total effect on the organization. Ultimately, the effect is to deliver sound, good quality products and something at a price point that was reachable for the average consumer. And this still extends today. Toyota does utilize TPS, and a lot of organizations may not use TPS, but they'll evolve this into a center for excellence, which could use some of those methodologies. So when I think about the word lean, it is really the culmination of TPS, as well as the work of W. Edwards Deming. John Krafisek in 1988 coined the term lean. It wasn't until 1996 that James Womack and Daniel Jones really talked about what lean is. And sometimes lean is referred to as lean manufacturing, lean service, and I just call this lean. But what lean means is it's a management philosophy focused on optimizing value while minimizing waste and processes, emphasizing continuous improvement and respect for people. I've been part of organizations where lean was not really communicated, the culture of it was not developed, and lean to the individual contributor was a scary term. It meant decreasing budgets, perhaps decreasing FTE. It means, in my opinion, the opposite. It keeps things stable, but it's also looking to help the business grow, create value, increase quality, and also just making sure the organization can scale for future growth. I created this word cloud for Kaizen, and you can stop the video and take a screenshot. Why I love word clouds is simply that they really help to give some notion, some idea. So perhaps when I first started talking about this, there was something in there that you didn't really pick out or really wasn't meaningful to your organization. And I think word clouds are able to drill into specific ideas or even a larger spectrum of ideas for Kaizen and how this can be meaningful to your organization. Now we talked about Kaizen. It's a continuous improvement model. It's about doing a PDCA, the Plan, Do, Check, Act. And so one event is creating that standardization. And you continue to do that time and again, continuous improvement to the next standard. And I like to think of this as being something where you take this on and the organization is able to capture these standardizations, to capture the improvements, and you can do this time and again. It depends on your focus area. Perhaps you're going to have different focus areas and different improvements along the way. Different teams can have their own continuous improvement cycle, and to allow this to be part of your organization's culture. While this might look like a nice to have, in my opinion, it is a must have. Organizations that don't do this are quite apparent. So if you're not doing this, your competition will be doing this. Don't you want to be first in class in your competitive set, in your particular industry, in your sector? Improvements in any organization are not accidental or magical. They are accomplished by intention, planning, and are often and almost always hard won. When I talk to leaders of an organization or even management and even individual contributors, sometimes it is noted that the problems are perhaps not that bad, or perhaps they'll go away. I think those are wishful, magical solutions that really don't exist. Sometimes people say to me, we're getting a brand new software, a brand new system, we're getting a brand new process. Just because you introduce a new system or software does not mean you're going to realize any sort of incremental improvements. This is, again, by intention, by planning for it. And I think these are always going to be something that is pivotal on every team member to institute this. And the other part I hear is people say, well, we're really focusing on earnings or revenue. So that's good. Organizations should be doing that. However, they need to do more. Just because you're focused in on that does not mean you can't focus in on continuous improvement, part and parcel and necessary for that organization to garner that, to foster that, and create that culture. Now, reasons to institute are numerous. Now, you can look at this and say that your organization has a different specific need. That's fine. It's to create that Kaizen platform, that continuous improvement culture and mindset. Customer satisfaction and competitive advantage. Maybe you're a nonprofit. Maybe it's really about the constituents of your organization, the recipients of that nonprofit. It can also be about the donors of your organization as well. So this applies to all organizational types. Increase efficiency. So this can actually help your organization to have faster innovation. It can focus in on looking at innovation as opposed to just solving problems or dealing with those problems continuously. Enhance quality. Everybody wants a better product, a better service, and this is really paramount in terms of the competitive world we live in today. Stronger teamwork and employee engagement. In my experience, individual contributors want to be part of this. They really want to have that ownership because they do this work on a day in and day out basis. They want incremental improvements because there's many things they want to achieve, not just solving problems or living in a very difficult environment to work in. It also creates a stronger bond for teamwork. And aligning to regulation and business requirement or organizational requirement. This is something where I think a lot of people don't think about because this could be about change as well in terms of what's being required of that organization. So this could actually add a layer of complexity, but addressing this now to help that organization run more efficiently and seamlessly. So you can look at this in terms of, say, business and other types, governmental, nonprofit, education. Now, when you get two or more people working together, you need to start thinking about Kaizen. And I think this applies to any organizational type. If you don't see your organizational type here, it is included. Now I'm going to go through the plan, do, check, act. I'm going to point these out in terms of, say, plan. Plan is about how you address this, how you start this out in the pre-planning of a Kaizen event. And then do is actually the event itself. I look at check and act as those post-Kaizen event activities. And when I look at plan, this is a point where you can look at the current state and what needs to be improved. So in my opinion, start simple, start with one, and then succeed at that, and then add the others as you have time in the business year. What is essential here is the executive sponsor can really be pivotal in making sure not just that one Kaizen event is successful, but the Kaizen culture, the continuous improvement culture is created. It's not just about an exercise. It's not just about an event. It's about making sure that this becomes a mindset and culture in the organization. Now, conduct the analysis. What needs to be understood in order to bring this to a Kaizen event, to create the Kaizen event that's going to yield the best results? Voice of business is really interviewing, talking to people in the organization where that Kaizen improvement will be placed. In my opinion, voice of customer is really your internal customer. It is your cross-functional partners. So I don't recommend going out to your actual customer. You can do so by a variety of methods, that survey, net promoter score, and so forth. So then you want to start thinking about establishing a Kaizen team. And let's look at that right now. The Kaizen team are members of the individual contributor community who are involved in that improvement area. You don't need to select all of them. I would select just a few. I would also select any subject matter experts, regardless if they're in the improvement area or not, that can lend value to that Kaizen event. Two pillars that support this are the Kaizen lead and then the Kaizen sponsor. Next, you want to look at setting the objectives and goals for the Kaizen event. What do you hope to get out of this event? And how will this be actionable? And how will you realize this in the organization? The actual event itself, what I would definitely recommend is using someone, say a project manager, somebody who's heavily involved and even has facilitation skills, but can also guide the organization and to really help that particular team come up with the best solutions possible. So the lead is not to give their point of view or their direction, it's really to help them guide the team together to create the best incremental improvement possible. Then after the event, you want to implement the Kaizen improvement. What does it look like? So you create that plan, so refine processes if necessary, and seek simplification. On the check and the act, we'll do that next. Measure the results against the objectives and the plan. Utilize KPIs to monitor what is occurring and the benefits of that particular incremental improvement. Analyze results and feedback to the implementation team. And lastly, identify any discrepancies and mitigate those discrepancies. Make sure that those discrepancies are closed. Take action on the Kaizen stage. So that Kaizen has created a standardization. That's really essential. So that standardization of this Kaizen can lead to future Kaizens and create that continuous improvement and also create new standards for the organization. Share the learnings. Share them across the entire organization if possible. If it's a smaller organization, you can do that in a town hall meeting, for example. Perhaps you can share this on your learning portal, your learning management system, any sort of discussions. And I think it's important for people to talk about this and socialize their particular learnings in the Kaizen itself. And then you can really look at this in terms of how do you recommend future Kaizen events? Maybe it's not for this particular standardization. Perhaps it's another part of the organization that needs incremental improvement. And then lastly, sustainment plan. It's about understanding the significance of an improvement and how to keep that improvement going. I think it's important for an organization to really start to think about this of not just one particular Kaizen event, but perhaps a continuous improvement culture in that organization. It all begins with the executive sponsor, and I think this person can really obviously support the Kaizen culture, Kaizen event itself, but continue to support that for the entire organization. This is really something that's top of mind for the organization. A culture, to me, is something that becomes almost second nature, and so it's very essential for that organization to have this support here. The intent and design is always, you do not have improvement cultures without intent. So this is something that you do because you want to do this. It's something that's important to the organization's leadership as well as down to the individual contributor community. Learning about this is something that you can put on your learning portal, your learning management system. Another way to do that is through continuous cultural development of this. Maybe it's communities of practice. There's different ways of really helping the organization to understand what improvement is. So to create that as a cultural environment of the organization. Ownership is all stakeholders in an organization. It's just not leaders. It's not just managers and directors. It's the entire organization, including the individual contributor community who has ownership because they help develop it. They know their particular areas better than anyone else. So I think this particular improvement culture is possible in all organizations. Finally, don't boil the ocean. That's a really important feature here. I think a lot of people end up going down that route, which is re-engineering, and I'm not advocating re-engineering. Incremental improvements allow for these improvements to be made over time and to do so in quote-unquote bite-sized pieces. This is essential to organizations to do. And it becomes not disruptive. It becomes part of your cultural identity of an organization, how you do things. And then select the right tools and give team support. And this seems obvious, but I definitely want to point out, I've been part of Kaizens as a coach where I watch a Kaizen leader and how they lead the team through a particular Kaizen. I've seen the wrong tools being implemented. Perhaps it's a value stream map when they just needed to really go through the process and rewrite that process. And that took more time than it should have. It should have been maybe a half-day event versus 2.5 days. I always look for the right tools, and I also want to support the team. It's important to acknowledge the team and making sure that you're listening to them and that their thoughts are also being included in that discussion. And so I've seen situations where that is not the case. Sometimes a Kaizen lead does it their way and it becomes their Kaizen versus the team's Kaizen. Select individuals in the improvement areas. The team can be composed of subject matter experts, which may not be part of that team, but have familiarity and actually expertise in that area. And if you're asking about team size, it'll depend on that particular Kaizen and the complexity of the issue that's being brought for that improvement. So, I tend to keep them very small. I want them under 5 or 6 people if possible. And if you're a small organization, you have fewer people, you might have 4 people or 3 people. Communication is vital. Stakeholders are frequently left out, and that is very important because maybe it's an internal partner, a cross-functional partner, and perhaps there's an improvement and maybe it's in your software instance and that instance has new fields and you might be depending on them to do something or not do something. They just need to be aware of it. Transparency and documentation. It should always be findable. It should be viewable, and there should be nothing that anyone can't see. There's no quote-unquote state secrets here that should not be allowed for other people to see. I've been part of legacy organizations, very large enterprise organizations, where lessons learned, though it's a part of quote unquote that community or culture, it really isn't implemented and utilized for future use. And sometimes, not always, there are some kernels of knowledge that are embedded in those lessons learned that are helpful to your organization and that can prove to be a really good starting point for a brand new Kaizen sustainment and culture. From my experience, individual contributed community members really want to be part of a solution. And ultimately that becomes a co-ownership of, say, leaders, managers, and individual contributors. Talking about this in your town hall meeting or your all hands meeting and really recognizing specific areas because it's a way to transmit this culture across the organization in case there are parts of the organization that are not instituting a Kaizen at this point. Perhaps a successful Kaizen has been completed. There's no celebration or recognition by the leaders, even the Kaizen lead, to that team. And I think it's time to think about that in terms of how you can mark that with a celebration. You can recognize each individual team member, and that's always appreciated by those team members. If I can help your team, please let me know. I'd be happy to be on site to help your team to institute perhaps the first Kaizen that you do, and perhaps you're a director or leader of your organization. I can help you think about how to implement this Kaizen and Kaizen culture in your organization. Please reach out to me. I appreciate you watching today. Thank you so much. I will see you in the next James All About Business video. Please give a like, support this channel, and subscribe. Thank you.